Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Overcoming Ageism, HBR Women at Work series by Harvard Business Review, narrated by Amy Bernstein and Anne Sprinkle. Publisher's note. This audiobook has bonus material. Please contact whomever you purchase this audiobook from to request the material. All figures referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material.
Introduction. It's Never the Right Age to be a Woman by Amy Bernstein, co-host of Women at Work. The hardest thing about sitting down to write the introduction to a book about ageism is admitting to yourself that you're subject to it. I spent much of my early career as the kid at the table. Being one of the younger people in any work conversation was sometimes heady, but more frequently it was intimidating, especially when I felt ignored by my more seasoned colleagues. Now, on our Women at Work podcast, I frequently weigh in as the voice of experience, offering my perspective based on 40 years in the business. I'm lucky, though. Despite those early slights, I've mostly sidestepped the injustices and insults that many women contend with, both when they first enter the workforce and as they age past 50. The World Health Organization defines ageism as the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act, toward others or oneself based on age. And it is rampant. A 2022 survey by the AARP found that 90% of respondents aged 50 or older had experienced some form of age discrimination, ranging from hearing negative comments to being denied a job or a promotion. To be sure, in the United States and many other places, refusing to hire someone because of their age is illegal. But subtler forms of ageism, devaluing contributions from older employees, failing to consider them for plum gigs, is not. It will surprise no one reading this that the AARP also found that women feel the effects, including depression and financial insecurity, more than men do, with women of color feeling them most acutely. As I learned early on, older workers aren't the only ones facing age discrimination. It's a problem for younger employees as well. Section 1 of this collection, Ageism Cuts Both Ways, lays out the facts and debunks common assumptions. In Chapter 2, HBR Associate Editor Emma Waldman shares her own experience and points to a 2019 study from Glassdoor that found that younger employees are more likely than older employees to have witnessed or experienced ageism at work. Maybe it's snarky comments about Gen Z or being called diminutive pet names. Maybe it's being left out of important decisions or meetings. Maybe it's not being given opportunities to take on important tasks because your abilities are questioned. As Waldman says, reverse ageism is real. It's not enough to recognize ageism when you see it. You need to be able to navigate and address the problem while moving forward in your own career. This book offers advice to women of all ages in doing just that, focusing on a few key areas. In Section 2 of this collection, we advise you to build credibility and advocate for yourself. Who doesn't relate to Executive Coach Dory Clark's point in Chapter 4? We all hope our merits will be recognized, and it's jarring when they're not. Some people begin to doubt themselves. Others get angry at the people who have failed to see their potential or their actual demonstrated ability. I have feet in both camps. Her sage advice? The best plan is to ensure we're vigilant up front about conveying our expertise, and that if we falter in an encounter, we move quickly to correct those misimpressions. You must make sure that you are your best advocate and make it clear what you're bringing to your team and your organization. You also need to make sure that you stay current with new thinking, new technology, and new approaches. As we advise in Section 3, you must keep developing, keep growing. And this goes for older and younger women alike. For younger people, it's about proving that they're open to learning as they advance their career. For more experienced or senior workers, it's about showing they can admit that they don't know everything, but are open and interested in continuing to expand their knowledge and skills. It also helps to nurture relationships and create support systems, as Section 4 recommends. One vital point: make sure your network includes people of all ages. A mentorship goes both ways. Consultant Cynthia J. Young argues that when networks include older and younger people, junior employees gain more access to social networks and build their leadership skills. Senior employees gain a fresh perspective and expand their knowledge around new trends or technologies. Everyone becomes more engaged. Goodness knows I'd be nowhere without the generous mentorship I got from more senior editors, people whom I admired for their integrity and openness as much as for their skills with the blue pencil. In turn, I continue to learn so much from my less experienced colleagues who see the world so differently from the way I do. While these 3 sections offer general advice on how to triumph in the face of ageism, we know there are instances that would test even the most dauntless among us. In Section 5, we offer help in navigating challenging situations. Menopause, for example, with its hot flashes, brain fog, and other attendant discomforts. Alicia A. Grandy of Penn State has advice for dealing with the stigma and, perhaps more important, for normalizing a perfectly normal phase of life. For more junior women who aren't sure when to push back, HBR senior editor Paige Cohen gives smart advice on how to decline low-priority work, even if the request comes from your boss. Their insights are pretty useful for those of us who are still dealing with this problem, even after decades of experience. And Jody Glickman, CEO of leadership development firm Great on the Job, offers tips for what to do when you're younger than the people you manage. Finally, we can't leave the work of addressing the problem of age discrimination to individual initiative, relationships, luck, or even the law. Like any form of bias, ageism is often woven into the workplace culture, and like any form of bias, we must deal with it transparently and decisively on a broad scale. Indeed, as Section 6 declares, it's time to fix the system. To that end, Professors Amy Deal, Leanne M. Dubinsky, and Amber L. Stevenson offer concrete ideas in how organizations can recognize and end gendered ageism. Their 4-part remedy: recognize age bias, address lookism. Don't get me started on this. Focus on skills, no matter who has them, and cultivate creative collaborations. One clear theme throughout this collection is that we can't battle age bias without help, nor should we. We need our colleagues, our friends, our allies, and our leaders. We need each other. I hope that by understanding how ageism works, how it affects us all, and how to address it, we're better equipped to fight it so that someday none of us will feel the sting of being devalued because of our age.
Section 1. Ageism cuts both ways. Chapter 1. Aging Up, Not Out. A conversation with Nancy Morrow Howell. Ageism is just one of the biases women face in the workplace. Whether you're too old or too young, you're not taken seriously. Your ideas are shot down, and you miss vital opportunities to advance your career. Nancy Morrow Howell is a social policy professor at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, and she directs the university's Friedman Center for Aging. In this conversation, Women at Work co-hosts Amy Bernstein and Amy Gallo talk to Nancy about how older women are treated in the workplace, the feelings of invisibility as they age in their careers, and the resilience that comes with experience. Amy Gallo. Since you've identified as an older adult, have you noticed that people treat you differently? Nancy Morrow Howell. Yes, I'm in a very privileged position, being a faculty member with an endowed professorship at WashU, so I can't complain about much. But even in that privileged environment, I feel like people treat older adults differently. We are still very ageist, and I have become more aware of that, mainly because I'm studying it more. There's the concept of implicit bias, that we're not even aware of how ageist we are when we interact with people or think about our organizations. I hear plenty of older people say that they sense they are viewed as more irrelevant. They say invisible, but I think irrelevant is a better word. Age discrimination is illegal on paper, but older adults are still often treated differently in terms of opportunities and leadership positions offered, and just have a sense of being overlooked for new engagements, especially when looking for a job. Amy Bernstein. I'd love to pass along a question from one of our listeners. Christina writes, "We are a cohort of 50 to 60-year-old women who are productive, capable, experienced, with wisdom and the ability to see context. In the workforce, because of our age and our gray hairs, we are seen as not technically capable, which she says is not true. They're seen as not forward-thinking and perhaps too experienced and expensive and, after a workforce reduction, not candidates to hire." She asks, are these anecdotal observations valid? Are they validated by research? Nancy. She is right that those are the common perceptions, but most of them can be invalidated through research. Looking at her perception that women are more expensive because people have been on a job a long time, there are cost of living increases, and time generally leads to raises. Older workers' salaries can be higher than others, but the cost of training people and replacing people who aren't as committed to a job is greater than those costs. And, in fact, despite older adults having higher risks for different chronic conditions, there is less absenteeism among them. So, a lot of these things we can confront with the facts. Older workers just have to keep it up. They have to work on self-development. They have to work on staying digitally competent. There's no resting on any laurels, and that takes energy. People of any age need to do it, but older workers are accused of not having as much energy. We need to make sure that we're demonstrating that, yeah, we do. Amy G. How have you been doing that yourself? Nancy. By what I'm doing right now, being interviewed by you all. On older workers' CVs, it's always a challenge. They can't be, here's 20 pages and all my experience. Who cares? It has to be short and well-framed. And there are new sections of CVs, like your social media, right? Your different opportunities, maybe a podcast, blog, or media coverage. I need to pay more attention to that kind of stuff in my CV or on my web page because it's not something that I'm used to. Amy G. How do you stay on top of what is happening and what needs to be done? Nancy. Well, I haven't 100% because it really is hard. I'm just lucky because I'm in an environment surrounded by young people. I have good relationships with my kids and grandkids, so I just try to be exposed and not say, oh, I don't like that stuff. I try to figure out what it is. That's a good example of sort of the energy it takes. You have to be proactive. That's why some people do eventually want to step back and retire and say, oh, I don't want to put in that energy anymore. I'm ready to do something different. Amy B. A lot of women feel they kind of disappear as they get older in the workplace. What are your thoughts on that? Nancy. I have that sense from colleagues whom I talk to and a bit of my own experience. There's a feeling of being overlooked as people turn to folks who are a little younger. For me, when people ask me, when are you going to retire? I think, I'm thinking about it, but are they asking me because they think I should? Are they giving me a hint? But it's a very common question to older people. That carries a lot of emotional messages, too, where you begin to question yourself, your relevance, or your competency. So that's one way that I see it. Amy B. Say you're in a meeting and the group turns to the younger person at the table. How do you handle that if you're an older woman and feel that you have something to contribute on the subject at hand? Nancy. For myself, I just have to know that I do have something to contribute and not accept the situation as being overlooked unless it's warranted. I mean, I want my younger colleagues to take leadership. More power to them. I want to help them do it. I just don't want the experienced and the more mature worker's voice to be excluded for ageist reasons. Amy B. So you would advise asserting yourself appropriately. Nancy. Yeah, assert yourself appropriately and have good things to contribute. I do think there's also a kind of slippery slope. Don't say, well, when we did this then, and 40 years ago. Don't drag up the old history lesson when you're presenting an idea. But I do feel so often I can frame something in a historical perspective. Like, we tried that a handful of years ago, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't. Just be careful that you're not the one who always starts with a long story from how we used to do it. Amy G. I want to go back to what you said about people asking you about when you're going to retire. How do you respond to that question? Nancy. Very honestly, because I have been thinking about it. I've always said that I would work until I'm 70, and then I'd start some sort of a step-down plan. So I tell people that. All the colleagues around me are thinking about it and talking about it, and I don't think people are trying to be mean or imply that I should be retiring. I think they're generally curious because it's such a normal thing that's expected of people in their mid-60s. But it's certainly changing. Next time, I think I'm going to tell them my plan, then say, I'm wondering why you asked that. What are you thinking? Or what are you thinking about me? I'd like to see if I can discover what people are thinking when they ask me that question. Amy G. It might force them to reflect on why, right? Because this is often implicit bias. It might encourage them to reflect on what caused them to ask that question. Nancy. Yeah. Amy B. If you sense, as an older woman in the workforce, that you're not getting the same kind of professional development opportunities as your younger colleagues, how do you bring that up with your boss or with HR? Nancy. I don't know about you all, but we have annual reviews that include our self-perceptions and our desires for what we need to improve and how we might do it. I would make sure that I had a very well-developed and articulated plan for myself for professional development that includes real concrete things that I could do to say, here's what I need and here's how I can get it done. Don't leave it to anybody's imagination. Amy G. Much of the implicit bias toward older workers can often be confused with empathy. You're thinking, well, this person must want to spend time with their grandchildren, or they must be tired. One tactic might be to just look at your thinking when those protectionist attitudes come into play. Are you really doing right by your older workers if you're just so concerned about them? Nancy. I love that point. We're very paternalistic. In fact, there's a thing called compassionate ageism. I need to protect, to relieve, to take care of, and support because most people think all older adults need help. A question we can always ask ourselves and our employees is, what does age have to do with this? Generally, the answer is not a lot, because we think age means someone can't do something or they must not want to do something. But individual motivation, preference, capability, function, those things are not necessarily about age. Amy G. We've talked a lot about the challenges. What are the benefits for older workers, especially people who are working past age 65, for example? Nancy. Oh, there are so many. Number one, we have to work longer because we don't have the savings that we need to live so long after we stop working. So there's pressure to keep working because we have to, but also because we want to. We know that working in general produces health for people. Cognitive health, social health, physical health. Those things are good. Now, that's not true for all workers. It depends on your job. Being in real heavy-duty physical work isn't necessarily good, but when people have the social connections and the cognitive engagement, we can certainly show that that helps people maintain and improve their health. Amy B. Are there benefits in having all that experience from having been around the block, or sort of knowing how things go, that accrue as you get older? Nancy. Yes. That maturity allows people to have a different perspective, more of a long-run perspective, where they can find the positive and withstand the negative a little bit more since they've been around the block. Amy B. You might say that older women in the workforce are more resilient. Nancy. I think so. They are by definition. They've been around the block and are still there. There's a certain resiliency or survivorship to these folks. Then there are also the experiences that taught people how to roll with the punches a little bit more. Chapter 2. Am I old enough to be taken seriously? By Emma Waldman. I started my career in New York City, working as an editorial assistant for one of the largest publishing conglomerates in the world. Fresh out of grad school with several years of internship experience in tow, I walked into the 52-story building with my head held high. I was to report directly to the senior vice president, an industry legend. She was poised and intelligent, and I idolized her. During my second week on the job, I received her email invitation for an in-person meeting. Heart racing, I dashed through the doors of her corner office, which overlooked Broadway and West 56th. Expecting to receive my first real assignment, she looked at me and said, "Emma, I just received a package from IKEA. Would you mind assembling my new lamp? Let me know when you're finished." I would love to dismiss this humiliating yet humbling moment as one bad thing that happened a very long time ago, but it still triggers me today, a woman approaching 30 with 7 years of job experience under my belt. As one of the youngest people on my team by a decade, I'm often hesitant to assert myself in meetings or ask more seasoned colleagues for help out of fear of seeming naive. In these moments, I find myself back in the corner office building my first boss's IKEA lamp and trying to figure out her intentions. Was it because I seemed incompetent? Was it because my role included assistant in the title? Or was it what I feared then and still fear now, that my age makes it hard for others to take me seriously? Was I, in fact, experiencing ageism? I needed to figure out if this insecurity has grounds in reality. Here's what the research tells me. When you Google age discrimination at work, you'll find article after article about bias against older employees and laws aimed at addressing this problem. In the United States, the federal government has protections in place to prevent discrimination against workers age 40 and up. Companies can't, for example, legally assume that someone isn't qualified for a job because they are too old to understand how to use a certain technology or implement the latest innovations. That said, it's questionable whether these protections always work. Ageism against older workers still runs rampant in some companies and industries. At the same time, these protections don't apply to young professionals. This is a problem. A recent study revealed that young adults are often more likely to report experiencing ageism at work than their middle-aged and older counterparts. It's called reverse ageism. On top of this, Glassdoor released a 2019 Diversity and Inclusion Survey in the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany that found younger employees, 52% of workers age 18 to 34, are more likely than older employees, 39% of those age 55 plus, to have witnessed or experienced ageism at work. Ageism cuts both ways. Professor Dominic Abrams at the University of Kent told me. It's true that people often apply patronizing stereotypes to older workers, and so they are often assumed to be less employable. But younger people tend to be more exposed to all forms of prejudice and discrimination than older people, racism, sexism, and ageism. According to my research, this is what reverse ageism can look like. More senior or experienced employees overlooking feedback from younger colleagues on projects. Seasoned employees assuming that younger colleagues can't be trusted with important tasks. Or younger colleagues being the target of stereotypical age assumptions. When I explore whether these examples fit into my own work experience, I'm brought back to one moment that took place before the COVID-19 pandemic got really bad in Boston. I was in the office talking to a fellow 20-something-year-old coworker about an upcoming assignment. We were brainstorming ideas for a new product when a senior employee turned to us and said, "Girls, can you please take your chatter elsewhere? It's very distracting." My peer and I exchanged a glance, confused and a little bit shocked. While our colleague may have thought he was just asking for quiet, there were assumptions embedded in his comment. Assumption 1, that we are girls, not two grown women. Assumption 2, our discussion was chatter, as if we weren't working on anything of importance. So no, not all of it is in my head. I understand how it might be easy for people to mistrust those who have less workplace experience than themselves, but this mistrust ultimately works against all of us and can lead to biased assumptions. When older workers doubt the competency of those younger than them, they fail us. They are not helping the next generations develop transferable skills. They're building barriers of mistrust. What Ageism Is, by Nicole D. Smith. At its core, ageism is discrimination based on age. The World Health Organization, WHO, divides ageism into several layers: how we think, stereotypes, how we feel, prejudices, and how we act toward others or even ourselves, discrimination, because of age. Taken together, the WHO reports those types of behaviors can affect physical and mental health and can even shorten people's lives by up to 7.5 years. Researcher Justina Stepinska and sociologist Konrad Turek conducted an extensive study that shows ageist behaviors at work can take two forms: hard and soft. Hard age discrimination is illegal or prohibited behaviors such as firing, demoting, or severely harassing someone because of age. Soft discrimination, like an off-colored joke or comment, isn't necessarily illegal and occurs mostly in interpersonal interactions. The soft form is the more common one, and women experience it more often than men. Since soft discrimination is rooted mostly in stereotypes, it can lead to people not valuing coworkers' contributions and perspectives, and even negatively assessing their skill sets. The primary victims of ageist work cultures tend to be...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?